Major support for these broadcasts is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, All Nation Renovation, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Bruce Mosler, Capital One Bank, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Chelsea Lighting, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Investors Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, the Wickoff Group, Urban American, Ackman Ziff Real Estate, Eastern Consolidated, Goldman Properties, the Moynihan Group, Muss Development, RAL Development Services, the Spandrel Group, LLC, Triangle Equities.
So there is a place called the Center for Jewish History. It is a facility where they have archives of history of the Jewish people. There are people they consider the soul of the center. And I'm fortunate today to profile the life of Bruce Slovin, the man responsible for the center. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get to the beginning. You know, let's talk about the grandparents. Where were your grandparents from?
Well, my grandparents on my mother's side were from Stavisk in Poland, and on my father's side, they were from Rozhizhsk in the Ukraine.
And they came over when, in the early part of the
early teens.
In the early teens. And where'd they originally settle?
In Brooklyn.
Now, you were saying to me that your grandparents came over here, and I think it was they moved to Bed-Stuy, correct?
Yes.
And they had a house, what, on Thorpe Street?
No, 699 Willoughby Avenue between Throop and Sumner.
Okay. And tell me about the house. It was like all the family members lived there.
Well, my grandfather on my mother's side was a baker, and he didn't like to wake up early, and you have to wake up early as a baker. And he bought in the early 30s this 24-unit apartment house, and he raised 4 kids, and the children got married, and they had children, and all his children and grandchildren lived at 699 Willoughby Avenue. It was a shtetl within a shtetl.
Now, so you're born over there. At that time, your father was, your grandfather was a tailor, or what was the term for a tailor?
A Schneider.
A Schneider. And your father had a factory where he would cut the fabrics, where he made shirts at 702
Broadway.
702 Broadway. And you're born over there in Bed-Stuy, and at that time, you even said to me you had payas, you were tzitzis. And what happened? Let's talk about this interesting thing when you're a kid that you didn't really know about the rest of the world. One day one of your neighbors wanted to take you somewhere?
Well, I went to a cheder, not a yeshiva, and it was Orthodox, as the entire religious structure in that area was Orthodox Jewry. And they told me to let my payas grow. I wore little tzitzis under my shirt and a yarmulke. And I went to public school. My mother was interested, and my father as well, as Americanizing their children. And so she was asking me to cut the payas off, and et cetera, and be a little bit more like the other kids around in the neighborhood. But I was closely attached to Rabbi Rosenberg, and I didn't want to do that. One day, Mrs. Drachman, apartment 3C, asked my mother if she could take me to see Santa Claus with her son Bertram. And this was a Saturday. And my mother looked at me and she says, Gewalt, would you do this? And I said, I can't do this. It's a Saturday. Santa Claus is not a Jewish, figure. But she convinced me, but we were poor then, that I would get a present from Santa Claus and I would have a nice day. So we went on a trolley car to Macy's. I met Santa Claus. I got my gift. And for lunch, I had a nice sandwich that Mrs. Drachman ordered for me. Turned out to be a bacon and tomato sandwich. I didn't know what bacon was, so to me it was just delicious. So I'm still fond of bacon and tomato sandwiches. When I came home, my mother asked me if I had a nice day, and I said yes. It was a terrific day. We met Santa Claus. It was very pleasant. I got this little gift. And what did you have for lunch? I said, I don't know. Mrs. Drachman said I should have a bacon tomato sandwich. And my mother said, what? Do you know what a bacon tomato sandwich is? It's chaza, or pork. It's can't have that. How come you had that? I said, I don't know, but she said to have it. And it was very tasty.
Good, you said.
It was delicious. So when I go to sleep that night, realizing what I had done, the sin that I had committed, I thought my life was over. The rabbis in teaching us were a little over dramatic in what could happen if we violated the rules. But when I woke up the next morning, I felt terrific. I still had the nice bacon tomato sandwich taste in my mouth. I told that to my mother. She said, okay, now we can cut off the payas because now.
So you went to the Italian barber?
Gaetano on Sumner between Willoughby and Hart, I think. And we cut off the payas. I still wore my yarmulke. And little by little, I stopped wearing the tzitzis underneath my shirt. But that's a story of the payas going by.
So now you grow up over there, you go to public school, and then your father moves the family to
Mount Vernon.
And you want to tell that story about the zip gun? I think that's a cute story,
Well, this was like 1945, 46, and the war had ended and the soldiers had come home. And they didn't come home to jobs initially. And so there was mayhem in the streets of Bed-Stuy. And we had little gangs formed to protect ourselves or just to make ourselves feel somewhat important. And we all were making zip guns, a little wooden stock, a spring, fired a single 22 caliber bullet. And I was trying to make it, trying to put it together. It's not that easy. I was 10 years old at the time, 11. My father found it in my drawer, and I told him what it was, and he knew, and he realized that the area was more dangerous than he had thought. So 2 weeks later, 2 weeks from that date, the moving company came up to our house, moved the furniture up to Mount Vernon, New York, and that was the end of Bed-Stuy for our family.
Later on, you got involved, I'll talk about it with Ron Perelman and the Revlon and McAndrews and Forbes. But when you were growing up, your father would take you to the factory, and what would you do with the fabrics?
Well, he worked on Saturday and Sunday. It was tough times. And he would lay out the fabric on the cutting table, and I would help him set up the patterns. He didn't let me cut, of course. It was you had to be quite proficient. And this way he could make some extra shirts out of, he was a contractor. He could make some extra shirts out of the fabric that was given to him by the manufacturer and sell the shirts. And that's what I did. I took, after I helped him lay out the fabric, I would take boxes of shirts and I would go to Lower East Side, and if I could bring back $7, $8, $9, $10 from selling very fine shirts, that was enough money, to buy the groceries at that time. And that's what I did. I schlepped around the Lower East Side selling shirts.
And you decided to go to Cornell.
Yeah. Decided to go to Cornell because many of my friends, Mount Vernon, went there, and I just wanted to go with my friends. That's what I did.
And so now, Cornell, you finished Cornell, and how did you decide to go to law school?
Well, my mother wanted me to be a dentist. I didn't want to be a dentist. It's hard to say. It just sounded like a good place to go to get a foundation for anything else you want to do, and law is that.
Right. Now, you were also, when I was reading, you were going to Columbia Business School also simultaneously?
I went to Columbia Business School during the summer times, but I never got a degree. I started working after I graduated law school. I never finished my degree.
So you graduate law school, and you go to work for this firm, Netter and Netter?
Right, real estate law.
And what happens then?
Well, I really wasn't performing terribly well. I didn't like the affinity for detail that I had to have as a lawyer. I understood the right answers, but I could never get the papers put together properly, and it was, I didn't think I was doing a very good job. And then I decided I'd like to look into the world of finance, so I went to a law firm, single practitioner, Earl J. Wofsy, where we were doing registration statements for small underwritings. And I got my taste of the financial world through that kind of work.
And then another law firm, and then you went to Kane Miller Corporation.
I went to Kane Miller Corporation through my father, who knew one of the brothers that were running the company. It was an American stock exchange, and they were in the food distribution business. And I came there as a lawyer. I was suing people all over the city to collect for the merchandise we sold them. But the brothers were interested in growing the company through acquisition. So I wrote a letter to the 500 graduates of the law school, Harvard Law School class in 1960, saying that I'm vice president, general counsel to Kane Miller, and we're looking to acquire companies in the food distribution business or related businesses. Might you not have a client that would be interested in talking to us? And I was bombarded with letters from all over the country from guys who I graduated with in 1960.
So
And
this is the formation of you in acquisitions. So
right.
So you leave Kane Miller, you go to work for Hanson Trust, a London-based company, and then you meet this kid from Philadelphia who got married at a young age and who was leaving his father's business, and he'd like to go into the conglomerate business. How did you meet Ron Perelman?
It was through a mutual friend, has since passed on, Ed Burnson. It was just, Ed knew what Ronald was trying to accomplish, and he knew that I had the experience that would be valuable for Ronald, and he introduced us. And I went on Ronald's board when he bought Cone Hatfield, a jewelry distribution and retail company. And then when he bought McAndrews and Forbes, the licorice, and Wilbur Chocolate, the chocolate company, I left Hanson Trust and went over to work with Ronald as president of his company.
So you're president of McAndrews and Forbes. You were there when he acquired Revlon. You were Revlon Holdings.
Well, the earlier acquisitions of note were Technicolor, Pantry Pride, and then came Revlon in '85, and then the banks in '88.
What about the checkbook company?
Oh, the check company was purchased. I had left Ronald, retiring 65, 66, and he bought the check company, printing company, just several years ago. And so, although I'm on the board, and I'm going to a board meeting now of the company.
It's 1985. You're on a board of an organization, and you're with a friend by the name of Joe Greenberg.
Yeah.
And what happens?
Well, we were on an unrelated board, not a board of Ronald's companies, and he, walking up Park Avenue to our homes, he asked me what I did in the Jewish world, and I said, not really very much. I go to synagogue at the holidays, and I give a few dollars to charity, but not much more than that. And he said, why don't you attend a board meeting of the YIVO Institute, representing the Eastern European Jewish cultural history. And I did go to such a board meeting, and sitting around the table were terrific people: Fanya, Michal, Mendel, Shlomo, Chava, and
your father and grandfather had recently passed on.
yes, and they were great storytellers. And what I found with these people on the board of YIVO was a continuation of my grandfather and father. They used to drink a little schnapps after
A little cigarette, a little
cigarettes.
schnapps.
They used to hold in a funny way. And so that tie to the old world, which was important to me, was reestablished.
So that was YIVO. So you get involved with YIVO. You're the chairman of the board today of YIVO. How do you said there were documents that YIVO had. So
Well, don't forget, YIVO was founded in 1925 with the idea of collecting documents related to their cultural history, what Jews were doing, who they were. And they collected lots of it, and came the Germans into Lithuania. They were in Vilna at the time. Now it's called Vilnius. And when the von Ribbentrop Pact with Molotov, I think, was broken, the Germans were moving east, and they took over all our records and archives. What happened, fortunately for YIVO and the Jewish people, is the Americans, in recapturing Vilnius, brought all the archival material to a big warehouse in Frankfurt, Germany. The Germans were going to make a museum on the vanished race, and they wanted to go over our documents and photographs and the like. And the GIs found it in Frankfurt and gave it back to us.
now you said, but YIVO, when they had their foundings in 1923 or something, subsequently the old Jewish Forward, the Yiddish newspaper, gave them money to buy a building.
Well, fortunately for YIVO, some of the important leaders were out of the country when the Germans moved east, and so they were saved, and they came to America, and they had a series of small homes because the documents had yet to be returned. And along the way, when they started getting the documents, they were looking for a bigger home. Things were in warehouses and the like, and the Forward lent or gave, I really don't know, $225,000 to YIVO to buy a Vanderbilt mansion on 86th Street and 5th Avenue. And that's where YIVO moved, and it had double basements, and that's where the documents went, as well as warehouse.
So what happens? How do you decide? YIVO's one organization. How do you go to the Leo Beck Institute, the American Jewish Historic Society, to the Sephardic organization, to put everybody under one roof?
Well, this again was the suggestion of Joe Greenberger. I understood that we weren't safeguarding our historic records, our culture. They were just degrading before our eyes, and I convinced the board after many arguments that we had to leave this high rent district of 86th and 5th Avenue and move someplace else where we could find better housing for our records, the archives, and the library. And Greenberg said, while you're thinking of that, Bruce, why don't you get a hold of American Jewish Historical Society? They're up in Waltham, Massachusetts. They should come down. They're not being used very much up in the Brandeis campus. and Leo Beck representing the Central European German-speaking Jewry. Needed a new home as well. They were on Lexington and 73rd Street, I think. And we spoke to them and we convinced them that if we can bring all our collections together, you would really have an opportunity to study Jewish history in its full dimensions, the scholars, the lay people as well. And it took a long time, many meetings, till we convinced everybody to join with us. And then we decided to start building exhibit halls, and I ran into Erica Jesselson through a mutual friend, and she was interested in coming down to the center of Manhattan to create a museum to replicate what she had up in the yeshiva campus up in the 180s. And she joined us, so that was 4 groups. And then finally, we realized that you can't say we're the Center for Jewish History without having the second leg of Jewish history, and that's the Sephardim. And so I contacted Rabbi Mark Angel and asked him if he could help us find a Sephardic group that would like to move in with us. I had visited the chief rabbi of the Syrian community in Brooklyn to ask his advice too on how I would go about bringing in not only Sephardic history but Sephardic money as well. And Rabbi Angel gave me a woman by the name of Janice Obadiah, who set up the first Sephardic group at the center, and then Leon Levy came in after her and created this American Sephardi.
And how do you decide to move to 16th Street to get this house together?
Well, we were looking around for a place to go. I had sold a building to Ronald Lauder and Serge Sabarsky. It's now the Muir Gallery. We've done a beautiful job in resurrecting that facility. And we didn't have a home yet. So in the interim, we moved all our documents to 11th Street and 57th Street. We were always a little bit ahead of what we should have been doing. We then started a fundraising drive to find a building to buy and to fix it up.
But now, that's a very interesting thing, because when you were a kid, you were telling me, and I was reading about it, that you would go to Myrtle Avenue subway and you would take these, we would call them the pishkas, of the Jewish National Fund, and you would stand there on a Friday, and you told me you took 2 pishkas, okay? And what did you do? You learned fundraising at an early age.
Well, as I said, in the cheder that I belonged to, they'd give the kids who brought in the most money from the pushka a little Jewish Torah, a little Torah. And I was winning most of the time, but not all the time, and I wanted to win all the time. And I figured out that if I had 2 pushkis, I would put the pennies in one and the silver and the dollars in the other. So when I turned in the one with the most money in it, I would win another little Torah.
But you played like football. You played 14 consecutive weeks.
Yeah,
you won.
I won, and then they stopped me from doing it. They figured out what I was doing.
So from that initial situation, you went out and started to fundraise. You get this building on 16th Street, and what happens?
Well, people like to give money to building projects. And the Jewish community is an intelligent community, a wealthy community, and a giving community. And I started getting $1 million check from this fellow and $1 million check from that fellow. And I said, gee whiz, I can get this done, And this fellow Jerry Fuchs, who's no longer a part of YIVO, was in the real estate business, and he found what was then Helen Keller's American Foundation for the Blind, and it had 87,000 square feet, which is 5 times more than I had on 86th Street, and I could buy it for $4.25 million. So we used the proceeds of YIVO's sale of the building to buy the building on 16th Street, and then we had to redo the building in its entirety to make it useful for archives and libraries and paintings and photographs.
So the kid with the pishka goes out and raises, how much money did you raise before you opened the real formal opening in October of 2000?
Well, it was about 60, 70, $80 million. I don't remember, we've raised, all told, well over $125 million, but that's over the years. But I had 17 perfected liens against the building from the construction people who were building the building, and I figured God will help me if I start. I didn't want to wait till all the money was in the bank. I wanted to start and show that there was a vigorous effort underway. And then I bumped into an old friend, Mort Lowenthal, who explained to me that there were municipal bonds that could be used for this purpose. And so we got the bank. I went to all the New York banks, but Allied Irish Bank helped us. They were familiar with the archdiocese around the country and helping those organizations build and borrow. So they gave me a letter of credit, and with that I sold the bonds.
With about 2 minutes left, I got to get a couple of things in. In the early 90s, you said you got involved with the real estate market. You started buying properties in New York. What happened?
I had some free cash in the early 90s, and it was fortunate for me. The market was low at that time. I was working very hard for Ronald, traveling around the world, but I started nibbling away at residential properties in Manhattan.
And you still have that business with your son right now.
Right.
It's based in, but it's headquartered in California.
Right. He's a Californian in Los Angeles.
And his name and your grandchildren?
His name is Carl. My other son is named Eric. The grandchildren, no, I know what you got. The grandchildren in California are Charlotte, Benjamin, and Maxwell. And the granddaughter in New York is Georgia Gracie Ryan Slovin.
Okay, and then you have you have a younger daughter who's...
Karen, she's in Washington working for a conservation organization called ICCF, a very fine organization. And she's living there with a friend.
Let's talk a little bit about 2010 and 2011, because you recently stepped down as chairman of the center.
Yeah, it was time for me to, not necessarily that I want to do that, but we had two men, more than excellent men, generous, smart, devoted, Joe Steinberg and Bill Ackman, and they were interested in taking on the responsibility. And when you find the opportunity to pass on your, I won't call it legacy, but your work to good people to follow you, that'll continue your work, you take that opportunity. And so they've been chair now for 6 months. I still am very close to the center, but I don't have that major responsibility that they have.
So for the kid who grew up in Bed-Stuy, who, you know, truly, as the JT Jewish Agency said in 2000 when you opened, is the soul of the center. You've done a lot, and I'd like to thank you for being here today.
No, thank you for having me. It feels good.